Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Sunday Sitdown, where it's not Sunday, but we're here sitting down talking about this past Sunday, this very lengthy passage that I had the privilege, we'll call it, of walking us through. It was your idea to draw in, and I think it was the right call. So I'm not like lobbing I'm not blaming you, but it was your idea to throw in the beginning of Luke chapter 12 in addition to the end of Luke chapter 11. It was the right call. It was the right thing to do. It all came together, but it was a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a lot. It was a lot of heavy lifting. So I thought you did a great job. It came together really well. And this is just another example of, I think, worth noting. As we were studying the passage a week ago, like last Monday, we read through to the end of chapter 11.
Like, this doesn't feel resolved.
And just felt like it leaves you hanging in a way that's maybe unhelpful. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions that we ask ourselves and that I want us constantly challenging ourselves with is like, where is the gospel? How are we preaching the gospel every single time we get up to preach?
Yeah.
And so, be it through very explicit, easy to see and understand, that is absolutely like, passages about Jesus' death and resurrection. How, beyond that, how do we see the gospel kind of coming out in all of the way Luke is writing and in all of the interactions with Jesus and in how Jesus is speaking and teaching and preaching? Because I think that's, to just simply say, like, there are two camps of when you ask people what the gospel is. There are kind of two camps in Protestantism right now. And one will say, well, it's Jesus' death and his resurrection. It's atonement theory. It's how you understand forgiveness of sins, period. Mm-hmm. And then there's another camp which says, no, it is all of that. It's Jesus' death. It's his resurrection. It's atonement theory. It's how you understand forgiveness for sins. And it is the way he lived his life and the teachings he gave and the kingdom that he brought. And as he lived, he brings the kingdom. Like, for Jesus to arrive is for the kingdom to arrive. And all of the ways of the world that he is turning upside down and subverting or overthrowing as he lives and teaches and challenges and rebukes, like, all of it is the gospel.
Yeah.
And I'm in the second camp. Like, I'm in that camp where, yes, it's his death and his resurrection. But when I talk about the gospel, I think when we talk about the gospel, we're talking about so much more. This is to say the gospel is really to say the life of Jesus, all of it. And so we got to the end of that passage in 11, the end of the chapter, and we're like, well, like, where's the gospel? Where's the turn toward hope? And where's the, let's not leave ourselves in this fear kind of moment, but what does Jesus speak into the fear? And that's that turn in 12. So it's like, sometimes you got to slow down and do a single verse. And sometimes you got to straddle two chapters and finish 11 and launch into 12 in a signisignificant way. And this is where we're going to end. Like, we're done with Luke now through till Christmas, like till the new year.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't think that'll surprise anybody, but I think it was a good place to end. So
yeah, better than, the Pharisees and teachers of the law conspiring to bring Jesus down,
And then Merry Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. So it resolves it in a way that Jesus pushes against fear and says, hey, like, don't fear these bozos. They don't know what they're doing any more than like anybody else does.
Would you been okay if I called them bozos yesterday?
I would have been. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just,
for sure.
like, just for future reference, maybe that comes up, and yeah, great.
Then he says, I'll tell you who you should really fear. Fear this guy who, after you've died, like, can throw you into hell. And they says, but do not be afraid. I tell you, do not be afraid. So it's this great logical sort of march. Like, hey, don't fear these guys. If you want to be afraid, I'll tell you who you should fear. But guess what? That doesn't even cause you fear. Follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
So what Jesus says is fear not. So that was a great logical march, but it does lead into one of the questions that we received from someone who was here on Sunday.
And questions that we had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in the sermon, and I think this is where we'll start, that person, who Jesus points toward and says, I'll tell you who you should fear. throughout church history has shifted a little bit. So you mentioned early church history often thought that person to be Satan. Modern, sort of later modern church history considers that person to be God.
Yeah.
And you can see reading both of those, like I can understand how a group of people would assume that's Satan. I can also see how a group of people would assume that's God. Creates different challenges for the implication of that passage.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is, and I'm curious just to talk a little bit more about that tension and, how do we understand, how do you come to understand that person Jesus is speaking about to be Satan? So that's one. And then two, if it is Satan, and here was the question that we received is, all right, let's talk a little bit about authority then. And does Satan have authority to do what Jesus is saying?
Yeah.
Who's Jesus speaking to? Is this like, what we don't want is for people to still be living in perpetual fear of, like I could do all the right things and like think I'm a Christian for my entire life and then die and find out Satan just got me. Like what's going on with that? So how do we push against fear today?
So I think the first thing to say is, maybe even before that, but even before the first thing, is that like, yeah, this is complicated. Christians don't agree on the specifics of this matter. And that's why it's great to have these conversations, right? So first and foremost that. Secondly, I think it's worth saying, and I didn't say this yesterday because maybe it was clear in my mind, but maybe it raises questions for believers. Is like when Jesus says, "I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell." Like that. The question of who Jesus might be saying that to comes up, right? Is he saying that to followers of Jesus? Is he saying that to the Pharisees? Is he saying that to just the general group of people? And so I think it's worth saying this is not directed to a follower of Jesus who you're living your life, just working toward following Jesus with all that you have. Like, I don't think that there should ever be a surprise, like that it was someone dies and they thought they, followed Jesus and they've lived their life for him and in the ways that we know how. And, that they would be like, oh, yeah, just kidding. Like, no, absolutely not. Right. Like, I think that is, for me, that's clear that, this is not referring to people who are committed to the things of the kingdom of God. But rather this is a hinge point in the gospel of Luke here, right? This is a hinge point for people where Jesus is sort of saying like, hey, everyone here, there are thousands of you here. Some of you Pharisees, some of you are skeptics. Some of you have been following me. He's sort of giving a call out to them saying like, hey, let's make sure we understand the stakes here. Let's make sure we understand what's really at play here. And he's saying, don't fear those who can just destroy the body. Fear the one who can do more, right? So like that is in my mind, like the first thing that we need to be very, very clear on, that Jesus is sending this message out to thousands of people saying like, hey, I want to draw you in alignment with me. Here's the potential damning implication if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So I look at Job, for example, and there's this interaction between God and Satan. A whole bunch of angels show up in front of God. Satan's there.
Super weird.
Yeah. So worth an entire series of podcasts on its own.
Yeah.
But, God asked Satan, like, where have you been? And Satan's response is, he's like, I've just returned. He says, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Mm-hmm. And then essentially what happens, so there's this conversation where God asks, like, have you considered my servant Job? Basically what Satan is trying to get at is, listen, like, does Job fear God? Like, does Job honor you because he has all good things? Or is it really something that's going on inside of his heart and mind? Like, has he been transformed? And so there's this kind of back and forth. And like Satan says, like, listen, have you not put a hedge around him and his entire household and like family and like you've protected him? Like, why wouldn't he fear you? Why wouldn't he serve you? And so Satan's given authority there to then go. Ultimately, what happens is he says, like, give me authority to start putting this guy through the ringer, and let's see what really happens. And so Job is this person who, like, Satan takes him all the way to the brink of death. And that's the interesting line that I see there. Like, so what God says to Satan, so in 12, chapter 1 of 12, verse 12 rather, of chapter 1 in Job, the Lord says to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your power. But on the man himself do not lay a finger.
It's interesting.
Right? Which is just, so I hear what you're saying is like Jesus is speaking to many, many, many people. And in part, I think what he's trying to warn them, like, don't be afraid. Don't live in fear of these guys who have control over your bodies and only your bodies, who are trying to exert control over your bodies and what you, like, how you gain righteousness or not, who is in, who is out, all like very human things. Fear one who has more authority over the things that are spiritual and not just physical.
It still gets at the struggle though of what kind of authority, how much authority Satan as an entity has, right? Because I think that some people, and there's lots of camps on different ends of this perspective that would offer that, Satan has no authority, right? Yeah. There's no authority to do anything, of any kind in the spiritual realm. And others who would in some ways give Satan lots of authority. And you even see, I was just thinking back to like Luke chapter 4, where Jesus and Satan are in the wilderness, and Satan seems to have a certain degree of power and authority there that Jesus ultimately rejects. And it may be a pseudo authority, but it is some authority, and Paul talks about the powers of darkness, the dominion of darkness, right? That he says has ultimately been disarmed by the work of the cross. Yep. But that there is still some power and authority. Yeah. Yeah. So like in Paul's language, powers and principalities. The thing that I always think back to, and this is just because this is how my brain works. Two things. One, you can point at a moment within World War II where the tides had turned, and where Hitler had died, and the where Nazis had lost, basically. The Nazis had lost, but there was still there was still death and destruction to get to victory, like to get to ultimate peace. Yeah. Like the cessation of war in that instance. So, you can start to picture a thing, a military, a government, a country, like an entity, a person existing in this state of having been defeated, but still like dealing out a lot of destruction. Where my mind ultimately goes is like you see the last. In the Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf ultimately falls into the caves, like down the Balrog, he's been thrown off the bridge and is falling, and with one like dying breath, kind of whips up and grabs him and drags him down. And so I think of like. What I want people to know is that Scripture points us very clearly to Satan being defeated, but existing in this state of already and not yet. We know that the things of death still exist. Like the things of death still have a hold on people. The things of evil still feel like they can run rampant. They've been defeated, but they've not ultimately been. Like we're still in that waiting period of. That final sort of last gasp, death sort of blow.
it can still do a lot of damage.
Yeah. And so then it still kind of raises the question. It returns to the passage in Luke 12 of, okay, does Satan have authority to send people to throw, as the language is, throw people into hell, right? And without getting into a whole discussion about the nature of hell and all that kind of thing, just at a surface level, whatever that looks like, does Satan have that authority? And that kind of is the crux of whether it's Satan or God, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So I say no categorically.
Okay.
And but I think it does depend on, it depends on a few things going on here, for me anyways. And because I can see reading both of these things. I think so does Satan have the authority to throw you into hell as it would be thought of as like eternal damnation, final judgment? No, absolutely not. Is Jesus talking about that final judgment here? There's some,
when he says Gehenna, is that ultimately what he's referring to? Is he making an eschatological claim about our eternal permanent fate and destiny? That's a good question.
And
to ask.
there's some I think difference of opinion there, right? Based on how people historically have interpreted the passage. So that's part of it. It just does depend on whether or not this is a passage that's speaking to that. I do though go to, so my Bible pushes us to Hebrews 10 and Hebrews 10:31, where it says, and I just want to read this so that I don't misquote it. So it's in a broader conversation, but in 30 it says, "For we know him who said, 'It is mine to avenge; I will repay.' And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God." So
we're dreadful. That's intense.
Like fearful, right?
Yeah.
So this, like what the editors of my Bible want us to start to see is that if Jesus might be pointing to himself ultimately as the judge who has authority over heaven and earth to rule and to discern and to judge and to separate righteous and unrighteous, right? To use like Revelation, like wheat and chaff. And what I think you want people to hear, and I think what I want people to hear is, here's the logical flow to what Jesus is saying. You think that you should fear these guys. Don't fear them. They don't know what they're doing. I'll tell you who you should really fear. Regardless of who that person is, we should really fear that person. But Jesus is saying, do not be afraid. I actually, I wonder if it has equal or more power, if it is God that Jesus is referring to.
You're saying be afraid,
but
don't be afraid.
Yeah, what he's saying is, don't fear these guys. I'll tell you who you should be afraid of. You should be afraid of me. Me being Jesus, not me. But I'm the one who's telling you to not be afraid.
Right.
So if I'm the only one that you really should be afraid of, and I'm the very person who's telling you, do not be afraid, that's got some power to it as well.
That's
so
good. Yeah.
I actually don't think it matters where you land.
That was what I was going to say.
On who this individual is.
Yeah, you can get bent out of shape over the specifics of it, because I think there obviously there's an intensity to the way that Jesus is talking here that can feel confrontational, and it can feel, at least for me when I read it, I'm like, man, I don't relish the thought of preaching on that, and yet I did.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think I'm with you though, like that I think that at the end it doesn't matter. And I think you could also parse the language even to say, when it talks about authority to throw you into hell, you could make an argument that if it were Satan, you could make an argument that it's like, okay, maybe not the actual act of like ultimate judgment, but that sort of like Satan tripping you up to a point that you have gotten to that place,
or
right?
even that's his domain,
right?
Like that's ultimately his, like that's the place he's gonna get tossed into, right? He'll be thrown there. So I think
Anyway.
where we want people to land though is, regardless of who you read that person to be, what Jesus is saying very clearly is either it's Satan and Jesus has authority over Satan.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Or it's God and Jesus is saying, I'm the only person you should be afraid of. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
So that's the
point
landing.
is,
The point is the landing
afraid.
place is don't be afraid.
Yeah.
So I think that's ultimately a really good word. Like that's the gospel kind of punching through.
Yeah.
So let's shift then a little bit. Let's talk about. So if we're not going to be afraid, if we are going to choose to live, all right, we're pushing in this good direction. You started challenging us really, thoughtfully around what it means to live an integrated life. Then, and so okay, we're all in. We're not going to be afraid. We're living life in alignment with Jesus, and we know that the devil wants to trip us up and wants to challenge and cause fear to kind of creep in, and wants to pull apart little pieces of life, like challenge you in this area, keep that to the side, keep your faith over here. Like you pointed us ultimately to what it looks like, or what it can look like to live a disintegrated life. Or I think the language you used was, everybody has had a moment in their life where they feel like it's all crumbling, like where it's falling apart. How do we start without kind of falling back to that fear place of, well, like, is it Jesus? Is it Satan? Is it the devil? Like, who's coming after me? Like, should I be afraid? Who should I fear? Like, without going down that again, for each of us, to not dwell on the fear piece. How do we start to live an integrated life? Where does it come from? One of the questions that we received again was, like, how much of this is on us and how much of it is on Jesus?
Yeah.
And I think the kind of language behind that could be, like, how much of this is just stuff that we need God to do in our hearts and our minds, our lives, our bodies, our souls? How much of it do we need to claim then and live into? But also, what's our responsibility? Because it's not just out there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we need to own it. Part of what it means to live an integrated life is that we are living into it. So tell us a little bit more about that, like integrated life. What does that look like?
Okay.
How do we get it?
I mean, in some ways, like the question of how much is on us, how much is Jesus. I mean, that's sort of like, that's the Christian life in a nutshell of like, how much is grace, what's my role to play, like, and you can,
how much did God choose me and how much did I choose God?
Yeah. Like these are like the constant rhythms and tensions that we run into all the time.
Yep.
But I think first and foremost, like, let's just look at Jesus. Like, I think that's like the best place to start, is like just the integrated life of Jesus, his life all the way to his death, right? And I think even just noting that Jesus's work at the cross, and then in the resurrection, that in and of itself accomplishes something toward an integrated life, right? That when we think about Jesus mending what has been broken in us, in me, that work happened at the cross. And so that in and of itself draws us toward integration, right? And I think that another word you could use that Christians have used a lot is wholeness, right? Where what was broken is made whole. And so you could say that is the work that happens at the cross. Yeah. But we also see it in the life of Jesus too. We see Jesus live in this way, where his full integrated self is on display. All of the emotions, all of the compassion, all of even the anger that we see at the beginning of this passage toward the Pharisees and the scribes. And you see all of this in Jesus. And Jesus says, like, bring all of it to me. Like I love the passage in Where Jesus is like, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. Like I am your good shepherd. I am the one who will bring like just comfort to your soul, right? Like there's like Jesus is saying, bring all of you, bring all of, like, and that is the integrated life in a nutshell, is like we bring all of ourselves before God and say, God, like just, we bring it over to you. We like submit it to your will and your care. I'm not going to withhold any part of me. And that's easier said than done. Like there are like so many parts of my life that sometimes I'm like, God, I don't want to talk about that with you because I know that you're going to convict me of it. I know that you're going to, and that is the disintegrated life. Yeah. That is the broken life, right? Where there are parts of ourselves that we're like, I'm going to just withhold back this little part of me because it feels safe.
Yeah. I like it. I like how it makes me feel.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ignore the fact that that my Christianity would have something to say about it. Yeah. So a very, very obvious one, I think, is someone who makes, and maybe even who would articulate it this way, someone who, quote, needs to make unethical decisions at work to be successful at work.
Right.
When they know and feel and wrestle out inside of them that their Christianity, that Jesus would have something to say about it.
Yeah.
That Jesus would have something to say about the way in which you are compartmentalizing to the point where you're making decisions that you know are counter Christ or gospel or kingdom. But you, quote, maybe need to make them in order to survive at work kind of thing. So it's that level of like, you think compartmentalize. I think everybody can picture that type of maybe scenario, but I think we all do it in little ways every single day.
Yeah.
I heard one writer said like what do you use to justify your sin? Like what logic, what words, what reassurance, what excuses do you use to justify your sin? Well, it's like, well, we're all broken, or well, we're all sinners, or you know, I experienced this, and so therefore this is an outpouring of that. And it's, well, okay, but maybe that means that God's not gotten at that piece then, if it is. I see it like, I see, so the language that I've found helpful is inside and outside. Integrated life is where your insides and outsides match. And I think you said something very similar to that on Sunday. Disintegrated life is where your insides and outsides don't match. Yeah. And it could be that your outsides look fantastic and inside you're really wrestling with some stuff. Could be that your insides are really wrestling with some stuff in a good, positive way, and then you're making terrible decisions on the outside. Like,
almost like you're like someone has like really good intentions but still end up doing like terrible things.
Yeah, or knows the right thing and still does because of you know other things. So it can go both ways, but it's like those, you know, the mismatch of like your insides and your outsides.
Mismatch is a good word. Like that I, you know, sometimes my desires and motivations are just mismatched. From what I ultimately really want, right? From what I know is good for my soul, right? Is something as simple as like, you know, like I know that if I go for a walk more regularly, which I have been in the habit of doing, I'm like, I feel better.
Yep.
You know, I can't always do a lot of like physical activity. I know it'll help me feel better. I know, you know, you can know all the things.
Yep.
But if you like, this is the disintegrated part of my life that I don't always do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And like knowledge doesn't always lead to life transformation.
As we see in the Pharisees and scribes, like they knew a lot.
Yep.
They knew a lot.
And they do a lot.
And they do a lot. Yeah.
But it's mismatch on what is going on inside them. Yeah. So that's the disintegration piece.
So when I think about like, so like the work that Jesus has done. So he lived a life, an integrated life. Yeah. He died an integrated death. He was resurrected. And then empowers and sends the Holy Spirit to his believers, which is the ongoing work, the sanctification through the Spirit of living, I think, an integrated life, right? That is the aim, I think, of a mature follower of Jesus is that, yeah, their insides match their outsides and their outsides match their insides, right? And so there is the ongoing work of sanctification, and the Bible often kind of plays with that a little bit, where you see, I think it's in the end of First Thessalonians, where God, where the writer says that God's Spirit will sanctify you. That is the work of the Spirit that is sanctifying you and making you holy and integrating you. And so there's this sense in which that is the work of the Holy Spirit to refine and to grow us and mature us. But there is obviously still the work that we need to do as well, right?
Yeah.
And so it is. I think it is one of those things where it's like it's got to be both. This is a partnership. It's an unequal partnership because it's a partnership with the living God, but it is a partnership, right?
Yeah. So this for me is where, like, when I look at this question, so how much of it is God? All of it.
Yes.
How much of it is me? Also in some way, but lesser, all of it.
Yeah.
Like, you can come to this so backwards, which the Pharisees do, which is if you just do all of the things in the right way, all of the time, every time, then maybe, just maybe, you'll make it. That's the wrong way to do this. That's not what Jesus is saying. That's not what we're saying. At the end of the day, we need God to do the heart transformation work. Like no one else can. And that's because of Jesus' death and resurrection on the cross. Like Jesus defeated sin and death, and he needs to defeat sin and death in me.
Yeah.
And in you, listener. Like Jesus needs to do that work. You can't do it on your own. You can't, you can't dig your way out of the hole of sin and death. So more is not going to make you better. It's not a quantity thing, it's a quality thing. Jesus needs to do that work. But it also demands everything of you. Yeah. Because it demands that you surrender everything and let go of everything and actually move away from all the things. Yeah. So for me, that it becomes a place of prayer, ultimately, right? Is how do you wrestle it out? So I look at Psalm 86:10. It's so 10, 11, 12, but let me just read verse 10 and 11. So the writer says, "For you are great and do marvelous deeds. You alone are God." So I go, yeah, all in. "Teach me your ways, Lord, that I may rely on your faithfulness, and like not my own." And then he says, "Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name." And that right there, like the prayer for, like, God, would give me an undivided heart? I think that's the prayer of integration.
Like, what a prayer. Yeah.
Like,
so good.
Pull all of me together.
Yeah.
And then do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to rely on you and your faithfulness and your work. What is your responsibility, listener? Pray that prayer. God, teach me your ways that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart so that I can fear your name.
And there are also so many incredible resources and frameworks for this sort of thing, right? And too many to name. Like as a staff right now, we are working through, it's not a new book, but it's a great one, is the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete Scazzero. Just a great guy who really would say I was living a disintegrated life. I was living a life that was not integrated with the things of God. My pastoral life was almost a separate thing from my personal, so a dude that did the work in many ways, the heart work that of seeking God for an undivided heart, right? So like that's just one example among so many. People like Dallas Willard are great thinkers in that way. John Mark Comer. Some of these guys are doing great work. There's, I think, like Ruth Haley Barton does a lot of good writing on this sort of stuff, right? So just to throw a female author in there as well. There's so many. We are spoiled for resources on this particular subject. But all that is to say is there are some great ways to be thinking about this, just from the life of Jesus, and also the ways that people have thought for centuries about all this stuff too. Yeah.
So I want to shift now and ask two kind of practical church level questions. and maybe individual questions as well. But the first is just to jump on that continuation of the Pharisees. So you had a line, and I'm not going to be able to quote you verbatim, but it essentially is that same line, that the Pharisees were really living out this legalism that said, if you do all the right things all the time, in the right way, every time, maybe you'll make it. And for the Pharisees, it was this collective longing. They longed for Israel to be restored and made whole again, and for the Messiah to come. And they believed that they had a role in that happening. Let's not forget that these are people who had good longings for their people.
Yeah.
But it came out sideways in that, if we can all just figure out the equation, then we will be good enough. And God will honor that, right? And I still think we do this today.
Oh, absolutely.
So, let's talk a little bit about how we might fall into that same trap. Because I think for the Christian, it's easy to say, well, it's all grace. 100%. Not my works and what I do. But then we turn around and we still live like the Pharisees, trying to earn from God something that is a gift. And man, that sounds exhausting.
So exhausting.
Yeah.
I wonder if as a church too, though, as a church, I'm trying to think about the ways in which, the big C church, but also even for us in our little corner of the world, and with the ways in which we do this. This isn't something that I think is a every week sort of situation, but I do wonder, you can kind of teeter into this, if we just plan out the perfect service, the right, with all the right things, the right atmosphere, the exact right songs, the preacher's going to say just the right words and just the right way. And then God is going to show up in this cloud, there's something there. There's something there that I wrestle with, as we plan out services, right? In what ways are we trying to manipulate God to show up in a particular way?
Yep. If we sing these songs in this order, then maybe,
And it's not to say we shouldn't be thoughtful about the way we plan out things. We absolutely should, in our service yesterday, we had, as I was chatting with the musicians and worship leaders for the week, I said, hey, this is a great list of songs. Can we do this one at the end? Because it matches really well as a responsive song to where I'm landing, right? That's good common sense.
Yep.
And it's a good way of just stewarding the songs that we have in our community. But, but you can take these things too far, right? To try to make God bend God to your will rather than the other way around.
Yeah. So I think a good indication of whether you are trying to earn something that can only be given, or whether you are living out of a place having received what can only be given, because that's going to change the way you live, right? It is going to change the things that you do, is whether or not you still fear that middleman, to take us back to the beginning. So don't fear these guys. Here's who you really should fear. I think for those of us who get stuck fearing, be that Satan or be that God, what we are ultimately going to do is, when we're stuck in fear, we are going to try to control as much as we can around us. And we're going to try to control the outsides, because inside we're well, I'm afraid and I know what's going on inside of me. And, I've got to make sure that I'm not being overly tempted by Satan, or I've got to make sure that I am doing the things that Jesus requires of me to do. So you start focusing on these external things, because inside you're still fearing that middleman. And so I think I would challenge people to think through the moments in your life where you act out of fear are probably not emotionally, spiritually healthy moments all the time, or even most of the time, maybe even all the time. So getting to that place where we're able to hear Jesus say, "Do not be afraid," that I think is what allows us then to receive. Because if we're not afraid, then I don't need to earn, because I don't need to be afraid that I might not earn it. I can receive because it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with Jesus. And I'm not afraid of my failures or shortfalls or things that might, I think, get in the way of what God is doing. So I think that's a good measure kind of where you are.
I think another facet is like church community, Christians in general. Like what is the depth of our ability to just be vulnerable and just transparent with one another, right? How easy is it to just put on this veneer, this, almost in many ways the things that Jesus is critiquing the Pharisees and experts of the law for. It is about this superficiality to their faith, this outward religiosity. And man, we are so culpable of putting on the veneer that our life is in order when really inside we're falling apart. And all of a sudden, like there are stories I'm sure both of us could share if we weren't breaching confidentiality. So I'm going to speak more in generalities of like just, all of a sudden someone comes in your office and they drop a bomb on you of some life shattering thing that they've done or has happened in their world. And it's like, well, how did we get here? Usually you're going to go back and it's going to be like, well, yeah, I never really felt like I could be transparent and honest with the people around me. And so I just kind of shoved all this inside until one day my life blew up.
Yeah. That's why. So like there is a goodness to confession.
Yeah.
And like children of the Reformation, sometimes we can throw everything out. But why do we still have a prayer of confession within our worship service is for these moments, right? Like it is to remind ourselves there's goodness in speaking the things going on inside of us, not to everybody and anybody, but certainly to trusted individuals and to those who need to know, right? Like these are hard conversations to have. So absolutely. Like, is there a thing that you're like holding back? You're just not like, nobody's going to find out about this thing. Nobody's going to know. That's probably something that like God's wanting to wrestle out in you and challenge you on.
Absolutely.
So that'd be one. Okay. I don't know if it's the flip side of that, but if we can wrestle all of this out in our own lives, we can want our own lives externally to look perfect. We can also add, as the Pharisees have done, extra burden on others to do the same in their lives. So I think what ends up happening, I think often in communities, but also just in lives and relationships, is the less you're willing to deal with your own stuff, the more then you also punt that onto other people and either become hyper fixated about everybody else's sin or you add extra burden on their lives because you're really trying to wrestle out what you need to in your life. So I think we also, you had a great line like where you're talking about the Pharisees and the scribes, the experts in the law who are there, who have it's not lawyers, is it? But these guys who say like, you offended us also. So and you're like, yeah, Jesus, like I haven't even started on you guys yet. So maybe his critique to them is you heap heavy burden on others. You're not yourself willing to shoulder the load. As a last point, how do we do that still too? Like, what are some ways that we maybe...
So I'm thinking, and especially like this is tricky in a church context, which is like so driven. It's driven by staff. But it's also driven by leaders and volunteers and lay people who are stepping up to the plate to make this community happen. And there are some churches that do this better than others, because I've heard some disaster stories from people where they're like, all this, and I'm not saying this about our church, maybe that's been true at some points, but where there were people who are saying like, all this church is doing is just telling me to serve here and do this and do more and do more and do more, like and to the point where they're getting burnt out because they're trying to do their job and have their family life and trying to volunteer in their church and do and like 5 different areas, right? And like that's a problem, right? That's a problem for churches, right? And so I think that like it is something that I feel deeply, that I don't want to place those sort of undue burdens, just of like burdens of life, like on someone in a way that is going to detrimentally affect their life, right? Like that's not okay. Right. And sometimes we can spiritualize it in a way that, hey, if you're not doing this, there's something wrong with your faith and that can be like manipulative and gross. And so like, I want to avoid that like the plague. And so like, that's one way I think that there is a tension that we run as a church community to put too much on the people in a way that is going to hinder their lives and their livelihood and their flourishing in their faith, right? That's something that I wrestle with all the time when I ask something of a volunteer, and it's actually super refreshing when they'll come to me and say, "Hey, you could ask me to do more," and I'm like, "Oh." Okay. This is good because I don't want to put that on you, right. You know. But if you're game, like fantastic. I'm so grateful. Yeah. But I think that from a spiritual, even from a preaching perspective, there is also a tension we run of going through a message even like this, and this is where where I landed in the end was saying like, this is not a message about saying do better. Because then we're doing the exact same thing that the Pharisees and scribes are doing, where it's this constant, just do more, do better, don't do that, do this, where it becomes this moralism that is devoid. I'd say this moralism that's devoid of Jesus, that's devoid of grace. And so like that cannot be where we land each and every Sunday with respect to stewarding the words of Scripture. We got to do that well. We got to do that well. Yeah.
Which, like, I think is a great place to end. Also, one of our cameras is shut down, so you know what? If you're watching, sorry, you've seen Justin since the camera died, which is great. You don't have to look at me, which is.
I was hoping if it was one died, it was going to be the one.
I'm just hoping that one also doesn't.
It's all right. It's all good. Yeah.
Here, like, I think that's a profound place to end, which is like the gospel does demand something of you.
Yeah.
But what it doesn't demand is just doing more. It is requiring of you to be, and to specifically be with Jesus differently than simply just doing more things.
Yeah.
So for you to land us there, I thought was just perfect. And going into Advent and going into the Christmas season, like, what do we want for our people is exactly that.
So like, this week, little sneak preview, we are doing like a week of pre-Advent lead in, right? Yep. And so you're going to take us through a couple passages and help us to almost unburden some of the burdens that we carry with going into the busyness of Christmas and Advent. Yeah. And just helping us to focus on the most important things. And like, I'm looking forward to that because I know my soul needs that. And I am sure I am not alone. Yeah. So great place to close us out. As always, we hope that this has been helpful for you. And even just as we're talking here, like you can clearly see, not all of this is like resolved, right? There are some things we're still walking away with being like, this is still like a tension in this passage that we're wrestling out. People have been wrestling these things out for centuries. That's okay. We're not going to solve it all in a 45-minute, 50-minute podcast, and that's okay. But we hope this is helpful as you are discussing things with your family, with your friends, with people from the church, or even just wrestling through internally. And if you do have questions, you can send them to questions@courtrightchurch.org, and we'll do our best to integrate, to use the word of the day, into our discussions when we do these. So hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.